Top Cold War Stories 8, the U-2, incident that nearly sparked World War III. Good evening, my friends, and welcome back to another quiet journey into the shadows of history. Tonight, as the world outside slowly grows silent, we travel back to one of the most dangerous moments of the 20th century. A moment when a single aircraft flying high above the Soviet Union nearly pushed two nuclear superpowers toward catastrophe. Before we begin, I hope you are comfortable tonight. Perhaps you are lying in bed with the lights dimmed low, or listening softly while rain taps against the window. Wherever you are in the world, I wish you peace, warmth, and a calm mind for the night ahead. This is Top Cold War Stories, Episode 8, the U-2 incident that nearly sparked World War III. The Cold War was often described as a conflict without direct battlefields between the United States and the Soviet Union. Yet beneath the surface, it was a war filled with fear, suspicion, secrecy, and constant preparation for nuclear destruction. In May of 1960, all of those tensions suddenly tightened around one man flying alone at the edge of space. His name was Francis Gary Powers. His mission seemed impossible: cross deep into Soviet territory in a secret American spy plane known as the U-2, photograph military installations, and disappear before anyone could stop him. But something went terribly wrong. And for several terrifying days, the world stood dangerously close to a conflict that might have changed human history forever. Tonight, we will step carefully into that story together. Slowly, quietly, and thoughtfully. By 1960, the Cold War had already wrapped itself around the globe like a long winter storm. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a silent struggle for dominance. Both nations possessed nuclear weapons powerful enough to erase entire cities within minutes. Politicians spoke carefully in public, but behind closed doors, military leaders prepared constantly for the possibility of total war. And perhaps the most dangerous part of all, neither side truly knew what the other was capable of. In Washington, American officials feared that the Soviet Union was secretly building massive numbers of nuclear missiles. Newspapers warned of a so-called missile gap. Citizens practiced duck-and-cover drills in schools. Families built underground shelters in their backyards. Fear became part of everyday life. But there was one problem. The Soviet Union was almost completely sealed off from the outside world. American intelligence agencies could not simply walk into Soviet territory and inspect military bases. Satellites capable of detailed surveillance did not yet fully exist. And so, the United States turned towards something extraordinary. A secret aircraft designed to fly higher than any fighter jet on Earth. The plane was called the U-2. Long, thin, and almost fragile in appearance, it resembled a glider more than a military aircraft. But its true power came from altitude. The U-2 could fly above 70,000 feet, so high that American planners believed Soviet defenses could never reach it. For years, they were correct. Pilots crossed quietly over Soviet territory, photographing airfields, missile sites, factories, and military installations. The missions were dangerous but successful. Each flight brought back images that revealed the true strength of Soviet forces. And interestingly, those photographs suggested that the feared missile gap was largely exaggerated. But by 1960, the Soviet Union had begun improving its air defense systems. New radar technology and surface-to-air missiles slowly changed the balance. Still, American intelligence leaders believed one more deep flight across the Soviet Union was worth the risk. That mission would begin on May 1st, 1960. The pilot chosen for the operation was Francis Gary Powers. Powers was calm, experienced, and known for handling pressure well. Like many U-2 pilots, he understood the danger involved. If captured, the United States government would likely deny everything. Officially, these planes did not exist. Before takeoff, Powers reportedly carried strange tools of the spy world, escape money, hidden items for survival, and even a small poison needle designed for suicide if capture became unavoidable. The Cold War often forced ordinary human beings into impossible moral territory. That morning, Powers departed from a base in Pakistan. His route would carry him directly across the heart of the Soviet Union before landing in Norway. Below him stretched thousands of miles of hostile territory. At first, the mission seemed routine. High above the clouds, Powers watched the endless landscape pass beneath him. From that altitude, the world below appeared distant and quiet. Rivers looked like silver threads. Cities seemed frozen and still. But on the ground, Soviet radar operators had already detected him. Air defense centers erupted with activity. Orders moved rapidly through military networks. Soviet fighter jets attempted to climb high enough to intercept the aircraft, but the U-2 remained beyond their reach. So the Soviets turned to a newer weapon, the S-2 surface-to-air missile. As Powers continued eastward, Soviet missile batteries prepared for engagement. Then, suddenly, an explosion shattered the silence of the upper atmosphere. A missile detonated near the U-2. The aircraft violently spun out of control. At extreme altitude, even a small shockwave could destroy the delicate plane. The wings broke apart. Warning lights flashed wildly across the cockpit. Powers struggled desperately to stabilize the aircraft, but it was hopeless. The U-2 was falling. For a few terrifying moments, Powers could not escape the aircraft. The spinning motion pinned him inside. If he waited too long, he would die with the plane. At last, he managed to free himself and parachuted toward the Soviet countryside below. And then, the impossible happened. He survived. Even worse for the United States. Much of the aircraft survived as well. Cameras, equipment, and film were recovered by Soviet authorities. Almost immediately, American officials entered crisis mode. At first, Washington attempted a cover story. NASA released a statement claiming that a weather research aircraft had gone missing after the pilot experienced oxygen problems. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that the explanation might work, but Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev remained silent, carefully silent. He allowed the Americans to repeat their false story publicly before revealing the truth to the world. The Soviet Union had captured the pilot alive. Khrushchev now possessed not only the wreckage, but also the living proof of an American espionage mission deep inside Soviet territory. The embarrassment for the United States was enormous. President Dwight D. Eisenhower suddenly faced one of the greatest political crises of his presidency. America had been caught conducting secret surveillance flights while publicly denying them. International trust collapsed almost overnight. And the timing could not have been worse. Only weeks later, world leaders were scheduled to meet in Paris for a major summit intended to reduce Cold War tensions. There had been cautious hope that relations between East and West might finally begin improving. Instead, the atmosphere became poisonous. At the Paris summit, Khrushchev demanded a formal apology from Eisenhower and an immediate end to spy flights over Soviet territory. Eisenhower admitted responsibility for the missions, but refused to apologize fully. The meeting quickly disintegrated. One historian later described the summit as collapsing within minutes. Any chance for meaningful peace talks vanished. Around the world, fear deepened once again, and ordinary citizens, many already exhausted by years of nuclear anxiety, watched helplessly as tensions between the superpowers rose even higher. What made the U-2 incident especially terrifying was not simply the spying itself, it was the misunderstanding. Imagine the Soviet perspective for a moment. An unidentified American aircraft flies deep across sensitive military regions during the height of nuclear tensions. Military commanders cannot know whether it is merely gathering photographs or preparing something far worse. In the Cold War, fear often moved faster than facts. A nervous radar operator, a mistaken interpretation, an aggressive military response. Any of these could trigger disaster, and both sides possessed enough nuclear weapons to destroy civilization many times over. The U-2 incident became one more reminder of how fragile peace truly was during those years. Yet perhaps the most haunting part of the story is Francis Gary Powers himself. After surviving the crash, he was interrogated by Soviet authorities and eventually placed on trial. To many Americans, he became a controversial figure. Some unfairly accused him of failing to destroy the aircraft or take his own life, but over time, opinions softened. Many later recognized the impossible situation he faced. A lone pilot trapped between governments, propaganda, and global fear. In 1962, Powers was finally released in a famous prisoner exchange on a bridge between East and West Berlin. One spy traded for another. A quiet human transaction in the middle of a divided world. And still, the Cold War continued on. Silent, tense, and always only one mistake away from catastrophe. As the night grows quieter around us, the story of the U-2 incident leaves behind an uneasy thought. So much of human history has balanced on moments invisible to ordinary people. a radar signal in the darkness, a pilot alone above the clouds, a decision made inside a guarded room by tired men carrying the weight of nations. And sometimes the world comes frighteningly close to the edge without most people ever realizing it. The Cold War lasted for decades, but incidents like this remind us that history is not only shaped by armies and presidents. It is also shaped by fear, misunderstanding, secrecy, and the fragile limits of human judgment. The U-2 incident did not begin World War III, but for a brief moment it deepened the mistrust between East and West so severely that the possibility no longer felt impossible. Perhaps that is why these stories still matter today. Because even now, in our modern world, nations continue to watch one another carefully. Technology has changed. Weapons have changed. But human fear often remains the same. And yet, despite everything, humanity endured. The long Cold War eventually faded into history without nuclear destruction consuming the planet. That alone may be one of the greatest quiet miracles of the 20th century. Thank you for spending this peaceful evening with me. I hope tonight's story brought you not only history, but also reflection. And now, wherever you are in the world, may your room feel calm, your thoughts grow lighter, and your night become peaceful and deeply restful. Good night, my friends.